As you can see, right now I'm working on a virtual machine and I have already a project, but we're going to create a new one. Let's call it MES tutorial. Okay, we don't need any of this, so let's hide them. Okay, so let's create a new project. Let's call it MES. We go to system, we go to real time, and in order to simulate this, we need to have an isolated core. Okay, set on target, set it. There we go. Okay, first of all, we are going to add our libraries. We said that we're going to work with history, IoT base. As you can see, this library has 3 protocols, but we're only going to use the HTTP protocol. We're also going to add the JSON XML library in order to work with XML. And we are also going to add the TC2 utilities. Now we are going to this folder. We are going to create a new one. Telegrams, let's call it. And we are going to add a program. It's going to be MES in structured text. There we go. Now we are going to create our first telegram. Let's call it function block check. And we're actually going to use an extension for this. This in order to don't declare all the variables over and over again. Let's create a function block. Let's call it HTTP request base. It's gonna be public. As input, have our client. It's gonna be a reference to our HTTP client. Function block for our XML. Header, XML string. It's gonna be a string. Reference to string. We're going to use serial number, a boolean. As an output, request response. This is a response we're getting from the server, whether a request is busy or not, whether we have an error. So in variables we have our function block requests, parse response. This one I don't have yet. Rising edge. String. Type string. It's also a string. Let's see. Hidden. Length string. Size of string memory. With these variables, we'll be able to create the XML structure. Request count, that's also udent. Let's create an error count. And finally, a boolean content result. Looking good so far. Now in our check telegram, we are going to add this an extension of our HTTP request base. There we go. On a rising edge, we execute this in order to send our request. We have a switch case here. Number state of 0, it's gonna be send request, and 1, it's going to be get content. These are going to be our methods. So let's create the request one. Earlier I mentioned we were going to use the Postman API. There's actually an example in the Twincat 3 documentation. We have get, post, put, and header authorization. We're only going to use get and post. We will be using post in order to work with XML. and get to send a request to the server. So the server replies to us with a certain information. So as you can see here, we have the racing edge, and we have a URI string here that we are going to declare on the Postman API. As a second parameter, it's our client, the request type, which is an object. Here is the get request type. Here's the post one, and the put one, and so on. So we will use some of this code, and we are going to adapt it to the application we want to make. So let's modify a little bit of it. Actually, delete this. Now we have rising edge q. If rising edge, then have a URI string, which is equal to a concat. It's going to concatenate a global variable. Let's call it is base path. So we go to the global section, global variable list. Okay. Of type string. Going to concatenate again with an URI. Let's name it this way. Serial number equals to, and then serial number. Let's add a condition. If request is sent, okay, that URI string, then our client, which is client, which is this one right here, the request type. IoT B request type. Request type. It's a get request type. And the other stuff we don't need, so 0, 0, and 0. Then I'm missing an end here. And state equals to 1. Request count equals to an iteration of it. We want to tell Twincat this is busy, and there is no error. Now let's create the get content method. Okay, get content. We delete this, we don't need it. So if our request is not busy, then throw an error. But if there is no error, request, then we get the content. Get content. There we go. First the content buffer. With an address of request response. Our content size. Calculated with size of request response. And null terminator. If our request status and it's minor than 300 and reset count. So we'll iterate through reset count. So in state, end state I mean, equal to 0 to restart this, to return it back to send request. So busy, it's false, it is no longer busy, and if there's an error, we count how many errors we have. For the get ticket telegram is the same logic, so we need to copy this, rename it, get ticket, and close all of this. Okay. We're only going to change the URI string. So let's call it get ticket .asp serial number equal to serial number. Okay. It's the same for the result telegram, same logic with a slightly change, but let's rename it first. Result. Yes. Let's go to send request. We're going to change a bit here. So this is the telegram that's going to handle the XML file that we are going to create. So we need to make a post instead of a get, because we're posting to the server side. It's actually kind of different here. So let's delete all of this and let's do it from the beginning. Okay. So we have length string. It's equal to length 2. I think this comes from TC2 utilities. Yep, that's why we need it. So address to the XML string. We will create the XML in the next video. Size of string memory. So size of XML string. There's a difference between these two. Length 2 returns the number of characters a string has, while size of returns the memory size in bytes allocated for a variable. Now let's make a condition. So if we send request result.asp, our client, it's gonna be itself, the request type. Maybe I can just copy that. It's gonna be post. We need to add the address to our XML string. Okay, gonna be an address, XML string, and length string. And 0. And then state's gonna be equal to 1. Request count equal to plus 1. It's busy. Yes, it's busy. And there's no errors. False. There we go. So the difference here is that we are going to have a post request instead of a get request. We add the address to our XML string in bytes because the request needs it, and we also need to provide how many characters the string has. So these are the 3 telegrams we're going to work with. We just need to call them in another function block. So let's create it. Let's call it function block telegrams execute. Okay, structured text. There we go. We don't need any of this. Let's remove it. This actually extends. It's an extension to the HTTP request base. Okay. So the client MES. Let's call it like that. This is going to be an instance of if b HTTP client. Our host name, it's gonna be our Postman API address. Right now we're just going to fill it in. Keep live. Yeah, keep it live. Actually don't like these spaces right here. And let's add a connection timeout of 10 seconds. Our structure. An instance of our structure that we don't have yet. Let's create a new one. Call it structure MES. Okay. Here we are going to store our telegrams to keep our code simpler and understandable. So let's create instance. Check instance first. Call check. Then function block of get ticket. Get. And finally result. Function block result. So now let's execute our client down here. So if our client is not configured, is dot then in host port, the default is 80. Need to add whether it uses certifications. In our case, we're not going to use any. So let's remove it. No server. Check. Okay, false. Some servers actually use certifications, so you need to check your server. If it is configured, MES, if it is configured, then we are going to execute our telegrams. Actually, let's call it stations. And here we need to execute our client dot execute. If we don't do this, nothing will happen. So now let's create a method here. Let's say it's a load station. Okay. Our structure, message structure. And let's first work with our check telegram. So boolean sent, it's gonna be global. Let's create a new global variable. Let's call it load start check. Okay. Load start check. It's of type boolean type. If we client, it's going to be http client MES. You need a serial number. We're going to generate random serial numbers just to simulate. We are going to create another global variable number. It's gonna be a string. Okay. Now we need to create another one to store the server's response. So load, let's call it content response. Type string. Load content response. It's equal to a MES structure, and I am going to pull my output variable, which is request response. That's where I'm going to store my server content. So now load start check gonna be false. Okay, it's the same logic for a ticket, so I'm gonna copy and paste it. Get ticket. Okay, this is going to be a different variable. Start get ticket. Okay, it'll be a boolean. It's going to change to get ticket dot request response, and this is also going to be changed. I'm going to create a new variable called load ticket response. There we go. Last one, it's gonna be a little bit different. Some things will change. So this is gonna be result. Now the variable, or start result, boolean, the same client, but we're not going to use the serial number. We're going to use the XML string that we're going to generate. Here we're going to create another variable called load XML string. Load XML string right here. Let's call it post response. Type a string. With this, the server is gonna return whether it's a failure or a success. So we function block result request response. Okay, and our boolean, it's going to be set to false once it's executed. So we are ready to call this method inside the Telegram execute function block. So now for this to work, we need to call our main function block into the main program. If this is not done, nothing will be executed. So let's make an instance of our Telegram execute. We just call it down here. Now let's continue by building this program. Okay. I was missing that. What about this one? Yep. Now let's continue by building this program. So we just finished the program logic. Now let's go to the Postman API setup. Let's create a mock server first. It's called MES. And we are going to copy our URI strings. This one right here. Okay. Copy it. Same for this one. Test, check, or just check. Post result. Let's create the mock server. Let's test it out. It seems to be working. Okay, it works perfectly. It's from our program here. Okay, it seems that everything is fine. So now let's execute our request. Okay, we have an error. Why? Where are my mock servers? It's here. That's why. It's a different mock server. And we need to delete the HTTPS part. Now it's running. Now it should work. Toggle this to true. Okay, now it works. In the next video, we will work in the XML structure, and after that, we are going to set up our database using MS SQL.